Hi, everyone. Welcome. We are doing an AMA with Anna Sproul-Latimer, and I'm really excited to have you guys ask all your agent-related questions to her. And this will be recorded, so you'll be able to find it on our website later if there's any part of this that you want to hear again. But really excited that you could join us and really excited to talk to you, Anna. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you.
I'm going to read a quick bio for you, and then we'll start with some introductory questions. So for everyone at
Great.
home, Anna Sproul-Latimer is the founding partner and president of Neon Literary. She has over the course of her many years in book publishing sold multiple New York Times bestsellers, major book-to-film deals, and foreign translations in more than 50 languages. Prior to founding Neon, Anna spent nearly 15 years as a literary agent, a foreign rights director, and developmental editor at DC's Ross Yoon Agency, which has since folded into WME. She's a graduate of Columbia University with a bachelor's and Oxford with a master's. She lives in the DC suburbs with her family and travels to New York frequently. So thank you so much for being here. I wanted to ask how you became an agent. I know that there was sort of like a little roadmap in your bio, but I don't know a lot of people that are agents or that set out to become agents. Was that a natural path for you? Oh, I'm having trouble hearing you. Can everyone?
Is it working now?
Yes, it's working. Okay.
Okay, I think I accidentally tapped mute on the microphone. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Um, my newsletter is called How to Glow in the Dark on Substack, and a long time ago, I wrote a post about how I became a literary agent. So if any of you happen to have read that, sorry, I'm about to just regurgitate it. Um, I honestly love the written word. I majored in English. A lot of my journey to the publishing world is kind of a cliche. I went to a college, Columbia, that had a very strong connection to the publishing industry. Virtually, Dick Simon, Max Schuster, the founders of Random House, Bennett Cerf, and Donald Klopfer all went to Columbia, although Klopfer eventually transferred to Williams. Anyway, um, it has a very strong historic tie to book publishing, and a lot of people mentioned that to me as a really fun potential career path if you loved books and the written word. I was super into writing in high school and majored in English in college. And I will be honest with you, I interned at Grove Atlantic, the publishing house, my sophomore year of college, and I had massive undiagnosed ADHD and anxiety, and it was in the publicity department, sorry, and completely sucked at it. I was like baffled by how much I sucked at putting together mailings and filing things. I had never had a job like that before, and I freaked out. I thought there's no way I will be able to work in publishing because I'm so bad at this one specific job. And I sort of ran home in horror. I ended up quitting the job because I was so, a perfectionist and couldn't figure out what was going on. I was 19 years old, by the way. I had a lot of maturing to do. This was 22 years ago. Then I came home to Washington, D.C., where I grew up in a media family. My mom worked for ABC News with a lot of people who wrote books. And I talked to them about alternative things I could do in publishing while simultaneously sort of crawled back into the womb at my house in Bethesda, Maryland. Um, and I was working part-time at Barnes & Noble, but I still wanted to do something careerish. And I think it was one of my mom's coworkers said to me, well, you could either intern for a house like National Geographic, which is in downtown DC near ABC, or you could work for a literary agency. And I looked up what literary agents were and what they did, and I thought it sounded cool and a little more suited to my skill set, which is it's not sort of intern admin stuff. Let's put it that way. My skill sets are editorial and writing, um, and also just sort of anticipating trends ahead of time. So this is in 2005. I looked up all of the literary agents in DC on whitepages.com. And I wrote them all an email being like, do you do 8-hour-a-week unpaid internships? And the only one who responded was a woman named Jennifer Manguera, who is still is the assistant to Gail Ross at what was then the Gail Ross Literary Agency. And I stayed there from the summer of 2005 until 2019. I interned for 2 summers there, then came back full time in 2008 after grad school and stayed. It was a perfect match for my skill set. And honestly, I would like to say that there was an element of really deliberate planning involved in my becoming a literary agent, but I've always gravitated toward things. Again, this is sort of the perfectionism where I can really excel without trying too hard or looking stupid. And for whatever reason, the variety, um, the talent set, and the extroversion required to be a literary agent, and the sort of comfort with a gambler's income really come naturally to me. Um, so it clicked. I clicked with the team there. Uh, I was managing foreign rights within, I'm sorry, this is a really long winded answer. I'm going to wrap it up in a second. I was managing foreign rights by the time I was about 24. And then I started a list of my own when I was 27. And then I only left to really start my own family, proverbially, with Kent, who is a good friend in the industry, when I was 34, 3 months before the pandemic hit. But that's another story.
I love that. And now you run an agency, and I love the redemption arc there. There's so much with, there's a bit of maybe imposter syndrome initially, a bit of perfectionism, and then also there's so much to be said for playing to our skills, right? The minutia doesn't suit everybody, and so I really relate with just being unable to go to the post office myself. So I think
Oh
that's
my
a
God.
millennial
Yeah, that's
thing.
like, that's my Achilles heel.
Same, yeah.
So yeah,
Um, so I love
mortifying,
that story. Thank you for sharing. And
of
then
course.
for those of you at home, we do have some questions that were sent in beforehand, but we love when you write questions in the chat. So if you have anything you want to know, please feel free to pop it in there, and we'll be sure to come back to it. So I think the first thing I want to ask is what pretty much every writer wants to know when they're starting out. How do you look for an agent, or how do you find an agent?
Yeah. So my answer to that is informed by the fact, a little more about my background. When I was at Ross Yoon was a nonfiction only agency. Like there was no fiction at the time. Um, I started representing fiction when I started Neon with Kent, but it's still only a minority of my list. So I mainly look at things as somebody with a deep, deep background in nonfiction. And the straight up truth in nonfiction is the easiest way to get an agent is for them to come to you, not vice versa. Um, it is definitely possible to get an agent by doing traditional querying. I sign probably 1 to 2 clients out of my own query pool every year, but that's out of about 3 to 5,000 queries. Um, so it's difficult, but I am constantly doing something we call scouting, which is not the same thing as literary scouting, confusing, in my job, which is looking for really promising nonfiction talent. I'd say I find the vast majority of my new clients either through that or through referrals from existing clients. And when somebody is out in the world writing genius things in a way that is already attracting national audiences, has something really moving to say, maybe it's not even writing. Signed my first client who ended up, she's written 3 New York Times bestsellers and counting. After I saw her on YouTube, I think it was a YouTube embedded in Jezebel, um, back in 2011 or 2012. Um, I think the classic sign that you are ready for most forms of serious nonfiction is when you have one or more agents spontaneously contacting you.
Mm,
And that's not necessarily a sign that those are the right agents for you, but it's a sign that your platform is developed to the level that, with some hard editorial work and the right partner, you have a strong chance of getting a commercial book deal.
that's fantastic. There are a number of people who wrote in questions about creative nonfiction, so I'm excited to ask you those. Um, but there was someone who wrote, and I think they were kind of half joking. I'm going to see if I can find this question. Um, can we turn the whole agent finding process on its head and make agents pitch writers? But you're saying that's actually the goal. That's how it happens.
That's how I do most of my business, the vast, vast majority. Of course, sometimes you have to take things into your own hands as a writer, and I really respect that process. And again, lots and lots of people find success that way. I do not want to give you the impression that that is in any way impossible. It really, sometimes agents say things to each other and phrase things in a way we wouldn't phrase them in a more diplomatic atmosphere. But I'm gonna say something that I have heard at agent cocktail parties before that is really true. Like, the querying process works when the project has serious potential. Like, when it's something that agents can sell, lots of agents will leap on it. When it's something that maybe can sell with the right editorial partner, maybe one or two will leap on it. Um, because that there's a virtually endless pool of things that are about 90% of the way to maybe
Yeah.
that with like a lot of elbow grease, you could make into something that's going to click in the marketplace. Um, and that the success of finding an agent with that kind of project really more depends on luck, who you're pitching, and what their bandwidth is at the given time. But with a really, really strong project, you really don't have to worry about getting lost in the query pool.
So there are two questions about that I think that come up for me. One is, what does that mean for someone who's actively querying agents and not getting much of a response? Let's say it's been a year, you have this book, you've queried 20 or 100 agents, and you're not getting much of a response. What does that say about the project? Should they keep trying?
Yeah.
Should they
That
rev
is a really difficult position to be in and something I totally empathize with. One of the reasons I write my own newsletter is to sort of stick a toe in the vulnerability that's required to be an author, because I think it's really important for agents to remember that on a bodily level, not just on an intellectual one. That vulnerability is terrifying. Um, and I have written a newsletter about this because it's a question I get a lot. And basically, it is a question analogous to if you're interested in love in a monogamous committed relationship. Uh, knowing when, hold on, my screen has gone black and I want to make sure. Can you still hear me? Well, my
Yeah,
screen's waking
yeah,
up.
that
Okay,
happens. Yeah.
fantastic. Um, I can't tell you for sure if you're going to find someone. Like, if you have lots of potential, lots of people who, like, on the surface don't really have potential, bafflingly get these amazing partners. Lots of people with amazing potential never find somebody, and it really sucks. Um, it is a chaotic system. You know, there are sort of asymptotal truths that certain things work for certain people most of the time until and unless they don't. Um, and when you give up, if you are not finding the sort of match you want in life, is entirely a subjective thing. In this newsletter that I wrote a while back called, I think, Agents Aren't Biting on My Query, like, when should I give up? I actually ran a Bayesian mathematical probability model to be like, okay, if you really care about like a definitive numerical answer, let's come up with an equation and run it. And it if you want to do that, it depends on the size of the estimated advance. It depends on what you estimate as like a success rate, perhaps based on the querying results of other people in your writing group or whatever. You plug and play it. I remember I did it for like a non or like a YA novel with a projected 60,000 advance or something. And I came to like 90 queries. That's when you should give up, 90. But then I pulled back and said, all of these variables in this, and it completely comes down to like arbitrary nonsense. Um, you are the only one who can decide when trends are amounting to something, when you think maybe there's something in this, in the consistent feedback I'm getting versus people are idiots. Because sometimes they are. Or we tend to have similar blind spots, agents as well. We are an overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly female. Um, we're looking a lot at comps of past titles, and we have to be very disciplined to expand outward and really think about creating new markets. That can be hard. I'm rambling now. So there's a chance we're an idiot, especially if you're from a marginalized community or you're doing something really new. In which case, it might behoove you to go prove the audience on your own and then come back.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a part of me that really, like, as a writer, I love this, but also as maybe kind of a sciencey person, I love the idea of being able to quantify something and having a formula that you plug in, like a mortgage calculator, sort of, but less depressing, right? But also, there's this part of me as a writer, and I think that a lot of people can relate to this. Where like we want to believe in the magic, to use your dating pool analogy. We want to believe that there's someone for everybody and that there's timing has so much to do with it. And so
Yeah.
it is definitely a difficult question to answer. But if you were to try to create some sort of average, would you say after a year or 2 years or 100 agents, would you maybe pull the project and try something else?
Oh,
Or,
man. I don't know the answer to that. I honestly don't because I'm an agent and not a writer. Um, and I feel like if I ever try to write or publish a book, my behavior will be completely and mortifyingly different than what I would tell you from this perspective.
that's
I think I would be a lot more fearful and a lot more sort of self-hatingly elitist in sort of a projecting bad kind of way.
yeah,
Uh, but I it it's just really it's subjective. I think you would have to really listen to your gut. You would have to listen to the sort of feedback you were getting. Like, is it mostly generic? Is it mostly cricket? Is it mostly substantive? And if it's mostly substantive, is it aligned? Is it aligned in such a way where maybe the suggestions on what to do are diametrically opposed, but they're identifying the same issue? And if so, like, what do you want to do about that issue? What's authentic to you? If it is a nonfiction thing, is there something that you can do to prove your audience and prove your platform that is not getting a book deal? Um, it really depends so much in this industry. The answer is it depends, and
sure.
that's so frustrating. But
Yeah,
maybe as a known unknown, it's a little bit more of a relief.
I think it is because I think it's an industry where we always want something new, right? Something exciting that's never been done before, but it's also kind of a risk averse industry that looks at whether it can sell. And somewhere in the intersection of those things is your book, right?
Yeah.
I have one more question, and then there are a lot in the chat, so I'll move on to those next. But my question is, and I think that there's probably something in the chat about this. You talk about being the one to approach writers and sort of solicit their work or pitch yourself as an agent. Are those writers that tend to have social media platforms that have a Substack? Are you more likely to come across those? Or with a creative nonfiction book, do you just read a lot of creative nonfiction and that's how you find writers?
It's a lot of different stuff. I would say most of the time when I'm scouting, I'm just doing the obvious. I'm reading national long form publications or smaller ones that I really like. Like I signed uh, Becca Rothfeld, one of my beloved clients who's at the New Yorker now, years and years ago after reading one essay on Sally Rooney that I think was in the Hedgehog Review. So before she had much of a national platform, but I was so obsessed with the voice and the sort of contrarian take in that essay that I reached out and contacted her. I am not really a snob about the platform. I will sign somebody who or like reach out to somebody who I know probably doesn't have a platform that's strong enough in on its own for a book deal just because I have a really good feeling about something. If there's like if something makes me cry, that is my main tickler. If something makes me feel less alone, floods me with relief, that's another thing. Or if just some turn of phrase is so genius that it's just not something you see in the wild that often, whether it's spoken or, conveyed with charisma or on paper, that's something that makes me reach out. And it hasn't steered me wrong so far. That's where almost all of my best-selling clients who were not bestsellers or people with national platforms yet started with a conversation from something like that.
So focus on writing work that makes someone feel something, and you're
I
on your
mean, that's
website.
what works for me.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to some of the questions in the chat. So, how do you anticipate trends? So, for example, there was a time when I think vampires were really popular. Maybe they're becoming popular again. I'm not sure. Do you plan ahead for that sort of thing, or does that not matter so much to you?
I don't really read about trends. So I don't look at publishing media to identify trends because honestly, cycles are such in our industry that by the time a trend breaks on the surface, um, the seeds of its own obsolescence are just underneath. Like, we operate in 2 to 3 year cycles. So I'm selling books that won't come out until 2028 or beyond right now. So something that's a trend today, like assuming that it'll be a trend in 2028 is like seeing somebody on a distant planet through a telescope and assuming that, the light that has come to you from 2 light years away is conveying a story that will still be true by the time you get there. It's just, I love an astronomy metaphor, in case you haven't picked up on that. Um, it's not possible to do. So, my God, sorry, I have a very loud doorbell. Um, what I do instead is a couple of things. I look at other industries and, like, what the vibes are, which sounds really weird, but my sister is an executive at L'Oreal, for example, and I have her give me every year all of these proprietary, like, the equivalent of Publishers Marketplace or Publishers Weekly, but for cosmetics and, like, cosmetics data trends, um, because they really speak to some underlying spiritual thing. So, like, 2 years ago, there was a surge in gourmand fragrances. I also make scented candles and perfume for fun, so I'm really into scent. Uh, there was a trend for that at the same time as Pantone was coming out with the whole mocha mousse era, for its color of the year, and I looked at that and correctly predicted that there would be a surge in cozy fiction sales that year because, that was part of that, like, sort of indulgence, that need for sort of, regression escape, so not like the escape of higher spiritual, but just like hiding under the covers, bed rot. This year, what you saw in both Pantone, although I did not predict the cloud dancer, that was like, what happens when I assume you have an all-white decision-making body. I did think that it was going to be something from the natural world that really emphasized spiritual renewal, because again, the cosmetics industry was saying like smoky and green fragrances that evoke spring and spiritual ritual would be really important. Incenses, people were much more into meditation. Instead of hiding under the covers, what they wanted to do was do the thing where you like sort of worship at the altar of the eternal and you sink deeper, deeper, deeper into the darkness until you come through to the light on the other side. Um, and uh, I think you're seeing that in the trends of what's selling right now. Unfortunately, that trend is showing up mostly as backlist. Like I was just in the top 100 best-selling nonfiction books in America and Circana, which is our big database for tracking sales. And books like Man's Search for Meaning and Mere Christianity are huge. They're in the top 50 right now. Uh, and all of those books on Stoicism, um, the books on like belonging, lot of Christian books. Um, that's a trend. So I'm looking around and I'm also just this is going to sound a little arrogant, but keep in mind that I have many, 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 many compensatory weaknesses. The great strength of my ADHD and my neurodivergence is I have throughout my life been eerily good at predicting trends about 2 to 3 years ahead of time. Like things I like become cool 2 to 3 years later.
That's a
Less
really
and less so as I get older, but like, like I like Chappell Roan in 2021.
yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that it can equally I think it's interesting that you look to, like, items, commodity, fashion trends, things like that, Pantone, L'Oreal, or scents, as maybe a reflection of what might be happening in the greater, like, socio-political sphere, which might be informing how what we're drawn to and what
Subconscious.
we.
And when it's a
Yeah,
little higher toward the conscious, it's when it becomes a book trend.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know a lot
Yes.
of us are really wishing we had a magic 8 ball sometimes or a crystal ball, and I think that all that is really right in front of us if we're good at pattern recognition, which you seem to really
Yeah.
trust your gut on that.
There is an element of chaos to all of this. Like, if you had told me that The Correspondent by Virginia Evans would be the behemoth hit of, I think it's 2 or 3 in the country in fiction right now, I would have been surprised.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Which it's actually really hopeful that outliers can be really successful too, that you don't have to be part of the mainstream trend in order to have something hit it really big.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed. I've just been writing about this, so it's top of mind that the number one thing I think authors can do to ensure their long term, if not success, sustainability in this field is get really disciplined about holding and carrying uncertainty
Mm.
and not letting other people's projected certainty in, no matter how confident or senior they might be. This is a industry that tends to confound and humble the certain.
Sure.
Um, Asymptotic things are generally true until they're very much not. And you've really got to be able to hold that in your head and not freak out and sort of grasp at little gossip nuggets and hearsay and assume that's going to be your future.
So there was actually a question that I think relates to what you just said. I think a lot of writers, we tend to have trouble letting things go, right? And so when we send our work out into the world and we're querying and we're waiting to hear back from agents, there's this sort of like refreshing your email 40,000 times a day. So, how do you recommend dealing with the uncertainty of writing an entire book and then not really knowing if it's going to get published or when, as you're waiting to hear back?
Yeah. I think how to deal with that differs person to person. Whether it's like some people meditate. I cannot meditate to save my life. Too much monkey mind. Staying busy, focusing on other projects. Uh, Again, trying to distract yourself as much as possible. Um, if you find that's always the case when you find yourself in a pattern of sort of obsessive reassurance seeking of any kind, the more you do it, the more the anxiety is going to ratchet up, the more you want to do it. And the way to disrupt that is to distract yourself.
Yeah.
And also maybe actively court rejection as well. Um, Exposure therapy, voluntary exposure therapy.
For sure. I think the more of those you get, the less they really hit you hard. Um, and so live your life, basically, I think is what maybe you're
Yeah.
saying. Yeah. So Eva says, when querying an agent with a novel, is it appropriate to mention a collection in development? And I think this question comes up where people will say, I'm writing a 3-book series. Do you like to hear that as an agent? Do you ever buy all three at once if the person wrote all of them before querying?
Well, I don't buy anything,
Well,
but
well,
and
so
I'm probably the wrong agent to ask this question because again, 90% of what I do is nonfiction. I do fiction, but it tends to be more literary. I'm actually one of my novelists. I'd notice enter the chat. Hi, Jason. Um, love you. Uh, but my partner Kent does a lot of story collections and a lot of really out there market establishing literary novels. And I know he would welcome knowing that and would probably be game to help you place some of those stories ahead of time to ramp up the commercial viability of the collection. Um, I would as well. It's just, again, it's honestly not something that has come up often in my career. I have done it once. And in that particular case, publishers were just happened to be more interested in the novels and in full length work than in the stories.
okay.
Them's breaks.
Where do you
But it turned me off. And I'm not a genre series person. So like I just don't even do that. So good luck.
Well, I think for a lot of people, as a reader, right, if I like the voice of a writer, I will want to read all their books. And they don't have to be a series, but I will certainly want more. And it's always not always disappointing, but it's like if there's a TV show and there's only one season out and you got really into it and you want more and there isn't any more.
Oh, 1,000%. Me and the diplomat. When is that show gonna come back? Um, Also me and Richard Powers. I finally met him at the W. Norton Centenary about 2 or 3 years ago, and, all of my friends there joked that they were gonna have to put in extra security to prevent a, misery situation. I love him so much. He's like 7 feet tall. Um, Sorry, what were you asking?
No,
I'm a
where do you scout for nonfiction writers? Are there good lit mags that you want to be publishing your essays in where an agent might read your work?
Sure. So lit mags, if I'm reading those, it'll be probably something like the Northwest Review, just because I'm friends with the editor, or the Virginia Oh my God, VQR. Uh, I I am more of a periodicals and online person. So like I read The Drift, I read the Hedgehog Review, I read the classics, The Atlantic. I read essays in the New York Times. I have canceled my Washington Post subscription, but as long as it is still valid, because it was a 1 year subscription, I will be reading essays there as long as I can. And I'm still torn about because I represent a lot of people who work there still, and torn about whether to renew or just cancel my Prime and do the really big girl thing. Anyway, I love Arts and Letters Daily. That has long been a source for wonderful long form nonfiction that is tends to be a little quieter and therefore a little more difficult to sell than it was 5 or 6 years ago. But I delight in the things I find there, and I've probably found 4 or 5 clients over the years by reading what they put up. Um, Honestly, I spend a lot of time just scrolling on TikTok, which is 90% brain rot for me. I have 3 elementary age children, so I do a lot of scrolling in darkness, uh, or like in my car during lacrosse practice. Uh, but if there's a creator there who has a really original voice and is just really charming and funny, I'll reach out to them. Even if they don't have a huge following yet, like if I think they're going to, I will reach out and I'll just be like, plant the seed in their mind. Um, yeah, that's about it.
That's amazing. That's really helpful. So a lot of the bigger magazines and some of the more mainstream periodicals,
Yeah,
Atlantic and New Yorker probably and things like that.
yeah.
So
New
yeah,
Yorker, almost all of the people in there are gonna be
agent,
signed and
right.
doing their own thing already, but I enjoy reading it.
But I think it does offer some direction to people, especially who write creative nonfiction, to answer those pitch calls, um, because those are often going to be more mainstream periodicals rather than lit mags and things like that. Um,
Yeah,
yeah. So, which I'm a big fan of publishing and lit mags. So I
I am
certainly.
too. I have nothing against them, and I want to read more of them. Um, there are so many wholesome habits I want to cultivate, and that is one of them.
Um, so let's see. There are a couple of others. How likely are you to take on a debut fiction client? I know you represent mostly nonfiction. A debut fiction client if they don't have a huge social media following, but they have a strong
No, I
manuscript.
don't fucking care.
Okay.
Like, if they have a really strong manuscript, in fiction, you really don't need it's a bonus, but if you have a really strong especially if it's, like, hooky and high concept in that way, but also, like, really readable in that way that the really big, boomy top 10 book clubby, like Carol Claire Burke's book, that just came, is like a New York Times bestseller yesteryear.
Mm.
Uh I would die to represent more books like that, and I will tell you something, just, pulling back the curtain on agent insecurities. So, when you're an agent, most of your business starts coming in through referrals pretty quickly, and very early on in my career, I had a big hit called Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and Other Lessons from the Crematory by Caitlin Doty, who's still one of my dearest clients and friends, just incredible. She's been a priceless career ally. Through her acknowledgement sections, her referrals, her friends' referrals, I got a very strong reputation as the agent of death, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but like a certain type of funny, honest, bracing, we're looking at a storm from shelter type of book about sort of grief and darkness and the most intense aspects of human experience, of nonfiction, that kind of book. I call it like sort of the Muppet dancing on the edge of the abyss. There's sort of a comic energy, but there's also like the swirling void. Um, and I can now, at the age of 41, after 21 years in the industry, just sort of walk in to a project like that, even if there are multiple agents considering, and it's pretty easy for me to sign it. However, I want to do more of that big, hooky, wonderful fiction. And when that shows up in my inbox, first of all, it's instantly recognizable as a hugely commercial type of project. And usually the people who have gotten to that level are quite savvy. So they've pitched a bunch of different agents. And I'm going to be competing against at least 5 people who are like the person, the way I am for those Boise Death books, but for commercial fiction. And it is therefore, even though I like to think I would represent that just as well as the people with the dedicated list. As to be honest, they would probably represent the death books just as well as me. I don't have that track record, so I'm at an enormous disadvantage. Um, and it's so screamingly frustrating because in order to compete for something honestly and with your whole heart, you got to leave it all in the field. You got to read the whole manuscript. You got to do the gushing phone call, the memo. You got to cry on, like, actually cry. You got to feel all the feelings that come with the book. I can't fake cry. Um, you got to set up the meeting. You got to really just pour your whole heart out, and knowing that you have probably a 1% chance of getting it as an agent, and then usually just not get it and hope that someday one person will pick you, and then you'll have that branching off. Um, so anyway, yes, I would represent debut fiction, and I would represent the hell out of it.
You seem like someone who really goes to bat for things that you love, and I love that. And I think there was someone in the comments that's like, more cocktail party chatter, please. And so I think that w- what I love about what you're saying is how much you're humanizing the experience of being an agent, which, like, obviously agents are human, just like editors are human, but there's this distance between writer and editor and writer and agent where we don't um, often see how passionate they are about the projects that they represent. And I'm really grateful for you sharing that side. Um, it seems like it is not unusual then, if you have a project that's really special, for multiple agents to be sort of clamoring to represent you. Um, so how do you compete for work? What are
Hopefully
people
not by getting this blotchy whole body rash of nervousness, on a Zoom call that I am noticing I'm getting now. Um,
I
it's
don't
just great. Okay, amazing. Thank you. So your question is, like, for projects like this, there will be probably lots of agents competing? Is that sorry, I
that
got distracted by the blotchy rash.
I thought that maybe what you were saying in the last answer is the chance that you said having a 1% chance of getting this project that you really love. Um, did I understand correctly that that's you competing with other agents to sign that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
for
So
sure.
so as a
We
writer,
call it the beauty contest, and
okay.
it's probably the single no, it's the second most painful part of the job.
So as a writer, what are we looking for as far as offers from agents to know who we should sign with? What are the different things that you can offer, or that you do offer to sign somebody or to sort of win in that competition for the work?
Yeah, so what I would say, I view this process, for better or for worse, as a lot as very similar to intimate relationships in a way, not in a creepy way, but in the sense that um, an agent-author relationship is different than most professional relationships. You're dealing with a lot of really high vulnerability. Often, I represent a lot of memoir, knowing a lot about the other person, both on the page and just in context, talking around all of these blocks that come up in the creative process. It is very close. And, you learn from experience having intimate relationships that the ones that work the best and last the longest are the ones that make you feel calm. So, not in the sort of jittery butterflies, like this is fear manifesting as giddiness sort of way, and not in the contemptuous, this person is actually an idiot, but she'll do kind of way. That calm feeling, and I think that's the single most important thing, because if somebody who doesn't really know what they're doing, it's gonna come across in the way they're carrying themselves, and you're gonna pick up on that even if you don't consciously realize it. So, that's the most important thing. The second most important thing is simply track record of selling to major publishers. Obviously, I have a bias about projects exactly like yours, so, like, I don't think the agent necessarily needs to have the deepest track record in the world representing your exact kind of book, but do they have longstanding relationships or easy access to, via, say, a mentor, to the sort of people who would buy it? That's really, really important. And That's why I specialize only in sort of literary and book clubby fiction, because the editors to whom I also sell nonfiction are the people who edit that, as opposed to, say, romantasy, which is totally legit and fun. It's just not where my connections are. So looking for those connections, looking for that sense of calm, and to a lesser extent, I think talking to other clients. I, I have a very anxious, like compulsive habit of checking Reddit's pub tips channel where authors talk about all of their fears and neuroses. And I saw somebody come up with something really diabolical along those lines of like using Publishers Marketplace to triangulate an author's current websites, which ones had left the agent, and contacting those people to ask why they left. I don't necessarily recommend that. There is one person who has left my representation through the years that that would be frightening to me. But I it's not a terrible idea if you happen to know the person and know that they would not be a security issue for the agent. Um, I I think just knowing how people work and knowing that they can deliver and knowing that they know the industry, that's it. And also a young agent, don't discount young agents. I'm not one of them, but I was a great young agent, and I think the people who are going to be great agents, it is so cool to sign with a future fantastic agent when you're one of the first 5 clients, because they will have unending, unbelievable loyalty to you. Like, I would die for all my clients, but I would really die for those people because they trusted me when I was 27.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, what about self-published authors? How do you feel about people who have a track record of self-publishing? Are they more or less likely to get signed with a traditional publisher? Do you represent
I
self-published?
mean, if it's a really great self-publishing track record, if the numbers are going like this, that's what every publisher wants now, like kind of famously. Um, got one in a little doo-doo recently. Uh, so I have no bias against that whatsoever. The question is, if you are trying to relicense rights for something that you've already written, that has to be really meteoric. Like, not just you've sold probably high tens or hundreds of thousands of copies, it shows no sign of stopping, like that guy who wrote Fear of Golden, Alan Levi. Um, if you have self-published other books and they have not sold that well, maybe don't trumpet that in your query. Um, but no, it's not the I don't know, the stigmatized thing I think it used to be, especially not in genre fiction. Um, but yeah, I would happily look at any self-published project. If it's something that is sold like 6 copies on KDP, it's probably a no for me just because it's not making its own business case.
Would it be a no for you to take on their next project?
Not necessarily. Depends on how strong it is, depends on where they are. Um, again, depends.
Yeah. So there are a lot of questions in the chat. I'm going to try to
Yeah,
sort.
I'm so sorry. I keep seeing it
Oh,
scrolling up
no,
and I can't.
this hour goes by so fast. So we only have about 16 minutes left. But I want to talk a little bit about you. You focus primarily on creative nonfiction. Can you talk to us a little bit about the subgenres in that? Like, for example, a lot of people are curious about the marketability of memoir. Can you share your thoughts on how to
Well,
pitch a memoir?
first of all,
Yeah.
I would not necessarily say that I focus on creative nonfiction. That's sort of a fungible genre, so I think a lot of what I do represent technically falls into it. But most of what I represent is actually what I would call serious platform history, science, um, memoirs that are sort of memoir with a point. So, like, we're not pitching it as a memoir, we're pitching it as a searing indictment of X, Y, and Z, illustrated with revelatory personal storytelling and a braid of cultural blah, 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 blah. Um, and the person has 300,000 followers on Substack. Uh, so, I am not the right port of call. My my business partner does a lot of really cool, creative, awesome stuff that will sell to a Tony or indie and then like burst out and be this incredible success. Um, that is a cool, legitimate model for doing stuff. It's just not something I have that much experience in. Anyway, um, what was your question? I'm sorry. Memoirs?
Memoir, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I would say the vast majority of people I talk to at both conferences and in dialogues like this are memoirists. It is so freaking hard. It's one of those things, it's the power law curve, right? It's a sales issue. This is true for all of book publishing, but it is wildly true for memoir. Um, Sales go like, from the number one best-selling book to say the number 10, it's like a hockey stick. The number one best-selling book is, Bellbird and Strangers. It's just blowing up. And then 20 ranks later, you're basically at peanuts already in terms of sales. So the things that click really, really click, the vast majority of them do not click at all. Personally, I am looking for, to a certain extent, great literary writing. Like if something is truly one in a million, truly, and most commercially published books are not, then that could sell on its own. But again, there's always some kind of like if there is a juicy hook or if there is a really demonstrable track record of the person being able to draw audiences. So like I represent US rights for a woman named Clover Stroud, who is a huge deal memoirist in the UK. She has a very strong demonstrated track record of writing personal stories that emotionally transform and appeal to audiences, like figuring out how to turn her story inside out so it really changes the interiority of the people reading her. And that you can just look at her presence here on this platform and elsewhere and see that. I'm looking for something like that. And if that's not there, I am looking for a through line of what I call value proposition or argument, or the best way of describing it is honestly the Rube Goldberg machine. So it does something really cool that's like the bigger purpose of the entire book, like getting the ball from this end of the room to that end of the room. But it does it in a sequential, interlocked, rigorously connected, um, wild and teeming and creative, but also in its way, linear series of functions or arguments within separate chapters.
That makes so much sense. I mean, the whole point of memoir, I think, is not just to tell your own personal story, right? But to show the transformation in the characters and therefore to have that transfer into the reader. And I think a memoir, unless it's by a very famous person, has to transform in some way. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So you're looking for that. What else do you look for? Doesn't have to be.
Again, that my screen went black again. So if I'm like frantically typing, I'm sorry. I need to like move the mouse more so it doesn't do that. Um, I look for things that make me cry a lot of the time because again, I am a very easy crier and I don't necessarily even cry at sad things. Um, I cried laughing 2 days ago about the story of the entire basket of 13 adults in a balloon that descended into someone's backyard and they were like having their coffee and they looked out the window and there were just 13 adults in a basket like in their backyard. There's something about that that is so funny and so touching to me that like if somebody wrote that kind of energy into a novel, I would probably want to represent that, that
As
kind of
someone
like screwball
Yeah, as someone who lives
shit.
in the hot air balloon capital of the world, I'm like, but that's just like the everyday magic that some of us might overlook. For somebody else, might be a life-changing scene that they might remember forever in a book.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking for that. Also, I'm seeing a bunch of people asking what is the worst part
Yeah,
of the job. I'm going to be super vulnerable here for a second. It's when clients stop working with me. I have had that happen. Every agent has it happen. It's totally normal. Intellectually, I know that sometimes business partnerships peter out. I have ended relationships with clients myself because business partnerships peter out. Uh, but when a client whose esteem and career I cherish ends the working relationship with me, it is, I take that a lot harder than I think most people. I pride myself on having a much lower turnover rate than I think most agents because I would sooner prostrate myself into sort of immune system failure than lose a beloved client. But it's very, very hard for me. It's the worst part of having ADD, rejection sensitive dysphoria. Those of you who have it know.
Well, I think that's also a testament to how much you care about your clients, because they really are partnerships, I think, when you're at that
Yeah,
working at that level.
I do.
Um,
I do.
do you go to conferences and do you meet authors at conferences that, might develop into a working relationship?
Um, I have signed people I met at conferences twice over the course of my career, and I used to do conferences a lot more. I have 3 kids. They are in 1st, 4th, and 6th grade, and the 6th grader the school only goes through 6th grade, so we had to do 7th grade admissions. Um, I am an extremely time-intensive stretch in one's parenting journey right now, and it is very hard for me to sort of, like, go to Kentucky for a conference for the weekend. The last one I did, I think, was the Texas Writers Conference in 2023. My colleague Aloy, Blythe Prados, still does a lot of conferences. Kent also does some. Neither of them have really intensive caregiving obligations in the city for now. That's just where they are in life. Um, and Aloy is a younger agent, so he's still very much building his list, which is another reason to go to conferences. I like going to conferences to network with fellow agents, and I like going for the same reason I'm doing this talk now, which is I want to demystify book publishing as much as I can. It's part of Neon's corporate mission. I want to give people real talk. I don't want these things to be mysterious. They are all known unknowns. Sorry to keep quoting Donald Rumsfeld here. Um, but uh, I I want to make things as transparent as possible. I get unusually fatigued, sort of in a Helen DeWitt type of way by one-on-one pitching meetings. So usually when I do conferences now, I ask that we keep those to just a couple or I not do them at all. And I will like waive the fee for the event in order to not do that. Um, that's particularly hard for me. And it's also, I don't think it's that useful for authors unless they take it in the sense of like, I am getting straight dope from like, I'm trying to mine this person from information versus actually query them.
Okay. Um, I'm reading a comment from someone that says genres seem limiting. GLBTQIA, gay, but my book is a portrait of a city and my coming of age, and how the more it changed, the more it is now the state where woke goes to die, to quote its governor. I don't know if there's a question in there, but I think it's a really interesting comment. Um,
Is
let's see.
that Florida? I think I'm just, it sounds like something Ron DeSantis would say.
I don't know. I'm gonna
Okay.
while we have a couple more minutes, I'm gonna go to a couple questions that were emailed in. Um,
The only thing I would say about that is if it is specifically Florida and it like draws in that really like wild Florida energy in a really clever literary way and also has some huge payoff, that
right,
could be a cool book. But if it's sort of inward gazing and it's like, let me work out my trauma with respect to my home state, and it doesn't feel like there's something in it. I don't want to say for me because I'm not queer, and I don't want to appropriate that in a weird way. But if isn't something clear in it for a large yet distinct target audience, that's going to be a problem.
that's really helpful. And they actually just responded and said, "You are good. It's about Miami." So,
Sorry about Ron DeSantis.
so one more question from the chat, and then we'll go to the emailed ones. Do your colleagues at Neon rep either new adult or literary fiction with an 18-year-old protagonist?
Yes, in short, yes. New adult, it really depends on how new the new adult is. Like the closer we get to YA, my representation philosophy, and I think this is my colleagues as well, is I will represent virtually anything, including children's, if the sort of flagship of the author's career is more commercial books for adults. Like if they want to do, I have represented YA before because it's a departure for a client who usually wrote for adults. Literary fiction with an 18-year-old protagonist, awesome. That sounds like it's for adults.
Yeah. You mentioned children's books. There was a question that was emailed in. What if you're a children's book writer, but you're not an illustrator? Would you be willing to rep them? Should they get an illustrator first?
So I'm not the right agent for this. I don't represent children's books as a rule. That said, I am currently developing 2 different children's books with clients who, again, are primarily adult nonfiction writers, but want to break into that space. One of them is an author illustrator. She did a graphic novel for her first book. The other one is just a writer, and we're going to be looking for an illustrator. Uh, Plenty of people do it either way.
Okay, that's really helpful.
But I'm also not an expert in children, so, take it with a grain of salt.
Sure,
I'm
sure.
just sort of bumbling my way into it.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about AI. I don't want to devote a ton of time to it because I think we kind of talk about it too much. But there are always a lot of questions that come in about AI. Mainly, have any agencies integrated AI technology into the filtration or evaluation process of projects that come in? Like, does that get used on your end?
No.
Okay.
I've heard rumors about that happening elsewhere, but no. Look, again, the sort of sad truth about my relationship with the query pile is I don't sign that much out of it. Kent and Aloy sign more. One of us is always looking at everything. They will generally forward stuff that they think is promising to me. Um, but uh, it's we do it very much by hand. Like we don't even use Query Tracker. We're very podunk here, and I would have a lot of qualms ethically about ever putting somebody's intellectual property into an LLM without their approval. Um, and I don't see myself ever using AI for that purpose. And I think that is something that agents should be disclosing upfront if they are. Um, Beyond that, I mean, I can't. I actually meant to copy paste this into the chat. That is the live stream link. Crap. I will. I'll send this to you. You can Jane Friedman. That's Friedman. If you Google Jane Friedman, AI law FAQ, she has a wonderful post on it is moralizing free. For what it is worth, I am one of the anti-AI agents. I think it is incompatible with a free society. Um, unless it is collectively owned, which is a whole other Unabomber rant I could go on. Uh, but I think it is really important for agents to understand what the law is around copyright. I also My anti-AI stance does not stretch to the point I am not going to automatically reject you if you use. I occasionally use ChatGPT as a sort of glorified natural language Google. Don't ever trust its results. Click through for God's sake. Like some agents care if you will actually not want to consider a project if you have used ChatGPT for research that way. I'm not one of them. Um, I have occasionally used it with my own writing to copy edit. It doesn't get everything, but it gets a little more than I get. Again, that's not disqualifying for me. Um, but there are important considerations around both copyright law and your long-term neurological function and capabilities, and also the entire point of creative endeavor um, that you need to keep in mind around AI, even
Yeah,
if it's not officially against the law yet or publishing regulations.
sure. I think that's really helpful. I think a lot of writers who are who aren't down with AI might feel betrayed by an agent who might run their work through LLMs. So that's really helpful to note. We only have about a minute left, and I there's a question that I think is really sweet. And I don't know if this is relevant at all, but this person wants to know, how do you help writers with writer's block? Do you kind of are you involved in any part of if a writer that you've signed gets stuck? Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And by the way, I'm happy to go a few minutes over if you guys are. Um, that is a lot of what I do. And I feel like it's a surprisingly large amount of what I do. It is also trying to figure out blocks that come up on my end as well in the editorial process. So, when one or both of us gets frozen, figuring out what is wedged in the subconscious there. Like, there are so many questions around writer's block. Like, is it because there's something off about the idea? Is this because I'm writing a book I don't actually want to write? Is it something simpler than that. Uh, a lot of the time, what it is you're telling some kind of lie to yourself. There's some kind of disconnect about what you really want from the process versus what you think or say that you want. So, like, uh, there's some emotional relitigation that's going on beyond wanting to, you want to solve something from your childhood or your current relationships as opposed to solve the plot of your novel. Um, Figuring out what that is, that is a process that can only happen in duality. And I am not a trained therapist. Primarily, I encourage writers to go to therapy, use therapy. I love therapy. I go twice a week. Uh, but solving that problem could involve anything from stopping work on something and just sort of putting it on the back burner, the way you can only sometimes see the Andromeda galaxy in the sky at night by out of the periphery of your vision. Um, it's same deal with manuscripts. Sometimes you can only see the problem. Physical exercise. I hate it, but it's true. Um, Runs or full body massages that are like really the kind that make you sore for days. Really surface stuff in a really creepy way. Um, I'm also a big fan of tarot cards. I do not believe that I'm talking to demons who are predicting my future. I'm more of a Jungian. I believe it's just a new way to get at your subconscious and use these archetypes to tell a story and then be like, but why does that need to be the story for me? Um, it's a good way to get out from under yourself. Um, but yeah, it comes up surprisingly often, mostly in the form of not so much writer's block of not being able to write as hitting a roadblock in the editorial process. Like, these pages are boring and I can't articulate why. Like, I am avoidant about this work and I can't articulate why. Um, Usually there's some kind of hard conversation or realization that needs to happen that I can't even consciously apprehend
Yeah,
without stepping back.
that is so useful. And in case it looks like I'm getting emotional about writer's block, I just have this tickle in my throat because I think there's
That's
allergy
okay.
season
In
is
case it looks like
yeah,
I'm in love with all of you and blushing, my beta blocker's not working. I don't,
I hear you.
yeah.
Um, Thank you. That was so insightful, and I've really appreciated the time, that we've had to chat. I hope all of you at home found this to be really helpful or inspiring. I know I have, and, I hope to have you back again sometime. Thank you so much,
Well,
Anna.
thank you, and I have to say, I have seen so many longtime subscribers to How to Glow in the Dark join the chat, and I'm so moved by that. Like, I wanna meet all of you in real life. I know at least one of you I have reached out about having coffee, and I keep flaking because I've been in different countries. I'm gonna reach out after this. We're gonna make it happen. Um, but, uh, I love that, and I don't know, I love this community, and I'm so grateful.
Thank you. We're really grateful to have you. Have a good night, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you at
Uh,
the next one. Bye.
Bye.